What's up, dorks and dorkettes? We are back for another.
This is a meaner way to call our audience away from the. I don't even remember the name.
Lackeys Nation.
Lackeys Nation.
We love Lackeys Nation. You guys are not dorks or dorkettes in our eyes. We are here to review our new release, our big new release of the month, the movie that we built the month around, which is, of course, Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, starring Matt Damon, Adam Driver, Ben Affleck, Jodie Comer, and a bunch of British people.
Yeah. Wait, I don't know if I can name anyone else in this movie.
Michael McCatton is in this film.
No idea.
Martin,
these are Game of Thrones actors.
He is. Martin Sazakis is in this. He's from Lord of the Rings.
Okay, sure.
Trying to see if I recognize. I'm looking at the thing. I recognize the mom, but I don't think I could name her off the top of my head.
What about the horses? Do you recognize them?
Of course.
There is one. There's a famous war horse from the movie War Horse. Can I tell you how excited I got that they said the word war horse this movie? That was like my Avengers Endgame when Captain America grabs the shield. As they say war horse, I'm like, I know war horse. I just, for some reason, the name war horse is really funny to me. I think this is the prequel to War Horse.
Equal to War Horse, The Last Duel. All right, let's do a quick non-spoiler section before we jump into our full discussion. I'll go first. I loved The Last Duel. I think it's really well acted. I think it's a really interesting story. I think Ridley Scott knows how to shoot this period really well and the action that relates to it. A bunch of great performances. I think narrative structure is really cool and interesting. I will say no more because I want you to experience that for yourself. This is the first one we've done in a while that is theaters only. So, step out to your little theater and try to help this movie make some money because it's bombing really hard.
Made.
That's true. We need more movies like this made. We need less crappy animated movie that's made for $20 million making 60.
Or Halloween forkels.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about my disappointment with Halloween Kills. I hated that movie. Go spend your money on this. This is the type of movie that we want created. It's coming from great artists. There's so much, there's clearly so much attention to detail and love for the art on screen. And unfortunately, it was a very expensive movie and is not doing very well right now. Zach, your non-spoiler thoughts on The Last Duel?
Yeah, I think the best thing to say is this is like a throwback to what movies thrived in the 90s and the early aughts. That it's too cliche to say not made anymore, but that people aren't going out to see. But it's just like a good old movies. This is like a real movies movie. There's a lot of skill gone into the craft of how to make this medieval piece. There's a lot of thought behind the script. I think the script is smarter than some people give it credit to. We'll talk a little bit about some of the detractors. I think there's a lot of bad statements to make, and I will go get some of that. But because they deal with a lot of serious topics in a way that I find pretty intelligently done, and with a narrative structure that is very creative on how to deal with this and make the statements. So it's a smart blockbuster. We need these made. It's also just great to watch movie stars do movie star stuff and watch Jodie Comer come out as a movie star. Really.
Absolutely. Let us jump ahead to a spoiler section. If you have not seen this film, please go to your local theater, pay your money, and enjoy how great it is. Yes. So the basic plot of this film is Matt Damon plays John de Carouge, who
What's your French like?
It's not good.
Okay.
I've almost no experience. John de Carouge, who is a knight. His former friend and squire Jacques de Gris is played by Adam Driver. Jodie Comer plays Marguerite de Carouge, Damon's wife, who is raped by Jacques de Gris, Adam Driver's character. And the movie also features their liege lord is played by Ben Affleck, who is having more fun than I've seen Ben Affleck have in a movie in a really, really long time. And it is
basically a one scene where he gets to say drop your pants twice to Adam Driver.
He's having I don't think I've seen a movie in the last 10 years where anyone is having more fun than Ben Affleck is playing this just complete lecher and ridiculous fool, Count Pierre.
Yeah.
Yes. So the movie, the main crux of the movie is the duel, which is precipitated by the rape. This movie also spends a lot of time leading up to that moment, explaining how the three characters, our three main characters, reach that point. And it does this with a really cool narrative structure, and we get to see the events leading back to like a battle in the war from the perspective of first Damon's character, then Driver's character, then Jodie Comer's character. And what is so great about this is that for a lot of the story, there's no difference. It's just a different perspective on the same events. What makes it really cool is that the differences are sometimes really small, but very, very, very important. And it actively, like, it explains why every character gets to the end point they're at without justifying or indulging those characters' perspectives. Because the movie clearly tells you on screen with title cards what the true perspective is, but it also allows the other characters' perspectives to shine through.
And it also helps you understand the motivations of the other characters because
absolutely
their heads and how they perceive things. So, like, you can fully be in the head of Adam Driver, who fully believes he did nothing wrong because you get to see that perspective. That is that kind of male idea of like not assuming responsibility because you just think everything is consensual when it's not. You're stuck in your own perspective. You're stuck in your own lens.
There's a real moment in the Driver storyline where he has this like sort of dream, sort of memory of Jodie Comer's character coming to him and them having a night together before the night of the rape. Almost in like, you can almost see his mind justifying the action. Like, it is almost the visual representation of the idea of she was asking for it or she was looking for it in that moment. Like,
I mean, there's a lot of like God is sending these messages, or because God of this, the dream is almost like a message of God to him that it is meant to be that she wants him and they are to have sex. That's how they rationalize every action in this movie, through what God's perspective is.
It's also funny how the multiple perspectives not only sort of exposes the ideas behind Driver's, truly heinous act of the rape, but also just like smaller like cruelnesses or uncaring moments or like lack of care from Damon's character as her husband, and all these like smaller moments where he's just more aggressive in the truth telling of the story than he is in the version of the story he wishes to tell for himself. It's kind of brilliant how much it exposes the male characters as people who selectively remember situations in a way that makes themselves look the most favorable.
Yeah, the way they glorify themselves or portray themselves as the hero of their own stories. The biggest is De La Cruz. What's his fucking name?
John de Carouge.
He's the biggest difference between his perspective of himself and through the other's perspective of himself. Very much he's the hero of his own story, this kind of noble guy, the right mindset to go to things, and a great husband, dutiful husband, and is the one being poorly treated by everyone else, and Damon's perspective. But when you get to the other perspective, he's just like a fucking brute, just like a dumbass brute.
Yeah, he's not
shouting and angry. Yeah,
he picks fights with people he doesn't need to pick fights with. I mean, one of the best examples of the idea of both men are the heroes of their own stories is the movie starts off with this encounter at a bridge in France where they're fighting. And essentially their unit, both Degrees and De Carouge, were sent there by their leader to hold the bridge to prevent the taking of a town. And Damon essentially decides to charge the enemy. And in Damon's own, like in De Carouge's version of the story, he saves Degrees' life after they charge. And he also does it in like a more heroic and noble way. When we go to Degrees' version, Damon's action is viewed as really rash and stupid and dumb. And like, well, we have to run after him, not because it's the right thing to do, but like, we can't just let him die because he's an idiot. And then also this is the version where Driver then saves Damon. It's just very interesting. All the stuff related to why Driver believes that, like, despite her actual protestations in the moment, that Jodie Comer actually wants to have sex with him. All of his justifications, to the point where, like, even when at the end of the film, his concern at the trial for rape is not that he would be found guilty of rape. It's that anyone would think he would have committed adultery or he would have done all these other things. It's like it's not even a moral thing. It's a blemish on his character rather than like he's actually worried about getting a crime, because in his own mind, that never happened. Like she totally wanted it. And he just like did what all men do, which is that a woman wants them, and why would they say no?
Yeah. I mean, that's why he was willing to go into the duel. They both went in thinking God will make the decision who was right. He was going in thinking he was right and going to win this duel because that was God's purpose.
It is interesting, like the idea, like all crime, like the crime gets judged by God, which is always really silly to look back in hindsight, because it's like in their mindset in that time period, that's what they were doing. But like to a modern audience who's watching the movie, they're like, yeah, but like what's really happening is whoever's the better fighter is going to win this duel. So the result of the duel is sort of expected, even despite the twists and turns that occur, because you kind of always throughout the entire film know who is clearly the better fighter, even if one of the other characters is just much better at playing the politics and making others like them.
The way they deal with the discourse of the rape in the movie has a lot of very specific relevance to modern discourse and the era we're in now, and the like that God, will decide things, and what's a message from God does play into recent events where I don't remember where, but an argument against a rape was you can't get pregnant from a rape because God will not like grant a baby to a rape. So therefore it was not a rape.
Science, Zach.
Well, this was science, but the argument was whether God like would not let you be pregnant from a rape, so therefore it was consensual, was a recent argument. And this movie does a lot in saying how the ideas have not progressed in hundreds and hundreds of years.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I believe this is the 2012 Missouri Senate race where Clay Aiken famously said this, and this allowed the Democratic senator, who I'm blanking her name, she's on this MSNBC sometimes, to hold the seat, because he just absolutely torpedoed his own campaign by claiming that pregnancy can't result from rape.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, so that's like, I think, the most obvious example of this, but a lot of the discourse has direct relevance just to push that idea that these ideas are medieval, yet some people still try to hold them and make modern over how we can, dominate women and keep them down. Same with the ideas of consensuality. Adam Driver has a line saying, she gave the like complimentary nose is how he explained it, like the expected nose that you would get, but that was just being polite because she was married rather than taking it as no. That's, I feel like, a consistent argument in rape cases. Like the no's weren't serious. No didn't mean no.
Todd Aiken, to correct myself, not the American Idol
contestant.
Get your
shit together. It's
not the American Idol contestant Clay
Aiken.
Todd Aiken.
Just trash Clay Aiken for nothing.
I know. My apologies. Yeah, it is interesting how you see that play out. I also think it's really interesting to think about the fact that the screenplay is not just the brainchild of Affleck and Damon, but also of Nicole Holofcener. And I feel like this last third of the movie, I think it is incredibly valuable that she is part of this, because I do not think a movie written by Affleck and Damon would have the same ability, the same nuance, and ability
to sense a craft of narrative craft. They're successful writers, but not really as professional writers as Holofcener is.
Yes, I think you can see their input into the screenplay and a lot of the jokier sequences and the goofier stuff. I feel pretty confident that Damon and Affleck basically wrote all of Affleck's dialogue on their own. And a lot of the Affleck driver scenes.
Wrote a part. Damon wrote his part. Affleck wrote the driver's story, which is basically the Affleck story.
Probably.
Doesn't sound that much, yeah.
I think also the ending is so interesting because, obviously we're talking spoilers. They have a duel. It's really hard fought. It has lots of twists and turns in the end.
It's really tense. Extremely tense.
It's so good. By the way, can we just say for the record, Ridley Scott is amazing at shooting this type of era's fight scenes. Like his ability to shoot fight scenes in the action.
Mixed. I think it was so good. I think that fight scene is great. I think the war scenes gave me like flashbacks to beach fights in Robin Hood. I thought they were really good. Too shaky, and I feel like have no geography to them. We talk about that a lot on the podcast, and I have no idea what's happening.
So I would disagree on one thing. I think they do have geography. I think they're too chaotic for you to understand the geography. Like, but I also think that like the intention of them was to be clear that medieval battles are not some kind of beautifully sculpted thing. Like they are just a bunch of people crashing together, and then it's just, people exhausted in armor falling over. And I thought, for what they were trying to be, I thought they were very effective. I also think the duel is incredibly well done.
Yes, I think he's great at the more one-on-one kind
I think
of
it's easier
action rather than the chaos of like a mass action scene.
It's somewhat like
this was like Gladiator.
If you go back and watch Gladiator, like the big fight scenes with the gladiators are good. The scenes that are really good are the scene where it's like Maximus against Tigris of Gaul or Maximus against Commodus or something. So they
haven't seen Kingdom of Heaven, so I can't tell you much about what the action was like in that, which is that's a Crusades movie. So it's still, he really loves like this period of, well, Gladiators at that, but between Last Crusades and this, he's going back to that medieval time period.
The problem with Kingdom of Heaven is it's so large scale battle sequence, which just in some ways doesn't lend itself to the best filmmaking and action shooting. It's like you sort of are stuck trying to just film as many soldiers as possible, which obviously removes your ability to be like do cool things. This duel is awesome. They joust. They do like 3 rides down.
I watched so jousting this summer.
Jousting, pretty freaking cool. I think we can all agree. Also looks incredibly hard.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's like extremely brutal.
It also just looks like I cannot imagine how hard it must be to hold a lance out there in front of you. Like that thing must feel like so much weight.
Honestly, it's hard for me to call it like fun because to me it's like really uncomfortable in a way that's like good movie making because they're just so tense and so stressful because the stakes are really known because not only are their lives at stakes, but Jodie Comer's gonna be burnt at like the stake, and the whole idea and concept of truth and righteousness is
right. She will be a liar if he loses the duel.
Yes. And so I just completely, and you have no idea honestly how it's going to turn out. I think they did a great job at making it seem like you could watch her burn at the stake by the end of this. You really feel that's a possibility, and I'm really uncomfortable. And then the violence is so brutal in a way that's also hard to call fun, but in a way I think is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. I would say that after the fact, you think that's a fun sequence. I think in the moment, you're so gripping the arms of your chair, focused on it. I do think the interesting thing about the fight is you come into it with. I think the movie also lets you play with your preconceived notions, which is you come into the fight going, I think Damon is the better fighter because everything throughout this movie has told me Damon is the better fighter, but he's clearly also the
Driver believes that too because there's the line where Driver's like, don't like discount him in a war. Like he's probably going to be back because he's like the best of the best.
But there's also like an idea you go into it being like he also looks like he's older and has taken more damage. Like he looks more beat up than Driver does. So like you kind of go into this really interesting like which side of that is going to like play out in front of our eyes. And I think the brilliance of the duel is that it never hints at what the next step is going to be. Like they do their rides. Somebody looks like they have an upper hand, then it flips, then the other person flips. Like it kind of plays with the chaos of actual duels, which is that when you're wearing that much armor and you're fighting like that, it's not like some kind of choreographed ballet sequence where you're going to have like really intelligent, classy fighting with like great skill for a while time. What you're really going to have is a bunch of guys hoping that they don't completely collapse from exhaustion because they're carrying so much armor. And what's really going to happen is going to be the first dude who makes a mistake is going to get seriously hurt. And what you see throughout this duel is actually they both make multiple mistakes and let themselves kind of get tripped and kicked over. And the physicality of it's like, it's not just like, we see so many movies where like a duel is just like classical sword play and it looks like they're fighting with rapiers and it's like a really well choreographed dance. And this, it's like, no, they're like kicking each other and tripping each other and like smashing and basically like my armor is if I hit somebody with my arm that has plating mail all over, it's going to hurt somebody. It's really effective.
Yeah, and you feel every hit, and when the axe goes into like the leg, it is brutal. And you were kind of hinting at this, but their characterizations throughout the movie also, I think, really come to play in how they fight. Like Matt Damon, who is this, kind of dumb and not strategic, but bulldog of a person
Absolutely.
that like will, fights with a chip on his shoulder and like does not give up and won't fight through anything, which helps him to fight. And Adam Driver's, biggest crux is his arrogance. And when the fight changes and he's walking up, assuming he's won the fight out of false arrogance, walking up to get, and everyone's shouting, kill him, is when he gets snuck up with the axe and the thing, and rather than taking guard over himself. So it came to finish him off, his own, characterization.
I mean, it's the best type of action is always based on the personalities of the characters we have. And you really are like Damon is he's just mean. He's mad. He's pissed off and he's going after him. And what makes this such an interesting fight is that Damon's hatred of Degree from the entire movie is coming into this. This is not just him fighting about the rape. This is him fighting about all of his hatred, all the things he feels like he's been done wrong to him and trying to take it out on him. Which in some ways is one of the most fascinating things about The Last Duel is that in theory, this duel is to prove the innocence of his wife, to prove that she was actually raped, to prove that she was actually harmed by this other guy. But because of the characters' relationship throughout the film, this duel really ends up being about so much more, about all these other different fights they've had, about Degree taking de Carouge's captaincy, of getting his father's old position, of gaining a piece of land that Carouge thought he was going to get into a dowry. Like all these different areas of hurt are coming up in this. And in some ways, one of the weirdest things about this duel, and what is in some ways the most brilliant part about the duel, is at the end when he wins, and you get this moment of Adam Driver being like, I know I didn't do it. And then Damon, kills him, basically proving that you did do it and you were a liar. And just according to the eyes of God, you have this moment where
stab to the face.
It's just brutal. It's brutal. There was a couple of really impressive kills throughout the movie. He punches like a sort of, there's also a scene in the other battle sequence where he grabs a guy, shoves the sword underneath his throat, and then slams his head down on the sword, which is a particularly impressive and brutal kill. But at the end, when he wins, he has this moment of like, he's celebrating his glory that he won this fight, that he beat this guy he'd been hating for years and years and years. And he has to
redemption for everything he's felt he's been wronged by.
And it's the moment you sort of realize that this, for Damon, was not really about the rape. It was more about all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's the moment where he has to be literally reminded by the king that his wife is still there. Like he's so in the moment celebrating his own glory that he's forgotten about the actual purpose of why they're there and the person who was actually harmed and the reason that there was a trial in the first place.
Who wants no part of this too? So her reaction too doesn't make you feel like this was like an easy, happy win for our hero, Matt Damon. It's like an uncomfortable moment ending of watching two not great people, fight in vain over egos and without consideration for the other people involved. Like he agreed to this duel without her consent, without her even knowing her life was also a risk as part of this.
And then they get on these
horses. She was just like, her reaction is like, she's like above this all. Like, this is insane.
I think she also has this moment where like, I don't think she's fully comprehending what's happening. There's like a relief when she's released and like realizes she's not going to die. But beyond that, I think she's so out of it at this point. And like, and then the moment that I think that sort of sets her on a path that she ends the movie on is that they get on these horses and he's celebrating his victory. And she's just kind of standing there because it's that moment where she sort of realized that, yes, Legree raped her and is a horrible person and is dead. But also her husband cares way more about the fact that he won a fight than about the fact that she was hurt in the first place.
Yeah.
And then we get the end of the film where, we learn that de Carouge died in the Crusades and she basically lived out the rest of her life with her kid by herself. And sort of the moment where you're like, oh yeah,
years.
Because she didn't really like either of them. Like these two men, like one definitely harmed her more than the other did, but it's not like de Carouge was a particularly great husband or great partner in all those moments.
Yeah, and it's kind of she got her time to thrive after because they already portrayed her in Carouge's time away that she can like run land better than he can. And is very competent, noble
Right, he was
woman
basically
in a way.
That's one of the interesting things too. Is if you go back to like his timeline, he's this really smart lord. He's doing all the right things. He's really noble. He follows all the rules, and everyone is wronging him. And then you cut to her timing, and like he is forgetting to collect rent from his tenants, like the most basic tasks you would expect from a lord. He's failing to do, and even just like they're behind on
horses.
They're behind on like sowing crops, and like he refuses to let them use horses because he doesn't want them to lose value. But then, you know, Jodie Comer's like, yeah, but if they die, they'll have no value anyway. It's this moment that sort of exposes him for like, he really is sort of like that era's version of just a meathead. His only ability, the only skill he has is he knows how to go off and fight.
Warrior.
He knows how to fight. He doesn't know how to be a lord. He doesn't know how to interact with people at court or build these relationships so he can rise up through the society. He knows how to do one thing. He knows how to fight and he knows how to kill people. And that's the only, like, you know, you see the only moments you see him succeed throughout the entire film are when he kills people in the war and when he wins the duel at the end.
I think that his performance is getting underrated at this point because it is kind of charisma-less in a way. There's still like a natural Matt Damon charisma that comes through that helps you carry through the character, but because he is such a dim-witted, you know, barbarian, there's not that the humor and the charm that everyone flocks to with Affleck's performance. But I think Damon's having great characterization here, and I think the changes he makes between the storylines is very important.
I think all four of them are great. If we're being honest, I think all four performances are really great.
Yeah,
and I think
it's such an acting showcase because the changes they can make from narrative to narrative is so smart. I think Jodie Comer gets the most to do with the narrative shifts.
I think Driver gets the most to do. I
think he changes the least from.
But I think I feel like his is the showiest performance, and maybe that's
your love for Driver. I think it's Comer's, but
I think she's the most important performance. I think Driver's the most flashy and maybe the one that's most likely to receive like Oscar consideration. I am looking up on Gold Derby because I want to look at.
I think Comer and Affleck are locks.
Ridley, probably Ridley as well. I think
Affleck will be supporting. The other three, it's really interesting how they're going to do it. They could put Driver in supporting, which is kind of a sham because it's really three lead performances because they each lead their own like short story.
The real question for somebody like Ridley is going to be like, what movie does he push? He has 2 movies.
Well, House Gucci's going to be a disaster. So
I don't think that's true though. I think you're a little crazy.
But I think they run Damon and lead and probably do Driver and Comer and supporting, which would be fraud. But that's probably what's going to happen.
I think Comer and supporting is actually not fraud.
She is the lead for the last 50 minutes.
She is for the last 50 minutes, but she's also the one who has she's removed from so many storylines. Like
I think there's 3 leads and 1 supporting actor.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get. This is a movie where I'm not going to get mad if they put. Oh, it looks like Gold Derby has her in lead, and she's in 9th.
Dude, what about Driver? Do you think Driver runs a supporting, or they want to push Affleck?
I don't. So the question is Affleck even big enough to run?
Yes, because sometimes people went for like 9 minutes in the movie. I think Affleck is a lock. Honestly, I think he's a lock. I think people are running to root for him. He's in the zenith right now of culture.
Yeah. So Gold Derby currently has Damon and Driver in lead.
Okay.
And Comer in lead, which is like not the smart move.
But that's
it's the honest move, but it's not what they're going to do because it's not the smart move. I would definitely run. I mean, let's be real.
Because then if you want to run Gaga too, then you have Gaga against Comer.
You're definitely running Comer in. You're running Comer in support. Because I feel like that's supporting feels more wide. I'm just looking at these performances. Feels more wide open than lead does right now.
But also, actresses always have to take that demotion to get the thing more than the males do.
I mean, but if you're going to rank the 3 of them in terms of screen time, she's probably 3rd.
Okay, maybe.
I'm not saying like that.
She's the crux character. That also makes a difference. Like thematically and story wise, is the most important character.
Yes, but you could also
she's the lead according to the story, but maybe not in screen time.
Well, I think that's it. You can make that argument. You could also make the argument.
This is really bad podcasting.
Well, you could also make the argument that like that the actual leads are Damon and Driver because that's the duel.
I just want, yeah.
I'm
just really interested in how it's going to develop because it's always.
I'm also interested to see like how much this movie kind of really bombing hard is going to affect its Oscar chances, especially when Ridley has another movie coming a month after. I hope this movie doesn't get forgotten because I do think it really, I mean, probably should win for costumes. The costumes are like, especially if you count the armor.
Design,
you count the armor into it. Yeah, I would say it's got a really big shot.
It's a lock for production design. Yeah, phenomenal. But Jodie Comer is one of the best performances of the year. I think the changes she makes from perspective is so smart. She's such a like delicate flower in the Damon perspective, and then has and it doesn't change to where it's a completely different character, but does show a lot more like initiative and competence and her own story. But she's still, the subtle change is what makes it seem consistent. Though it's not like they're playing drastically different people.
Yeah, no, I think that's like this is one of these movies that I'm really excited to get the DVD of it and then watch. I want to see what I really want to watch is I want to watch the YouTube version where somebody takes the scenes that appear in all three timelines and then cuts them to get like you get to see like the 3-shot of all of them and like see how small because I feel like that the brilliance of this is just how small the differences are. Yeah. Like obviously there's going to be some larger differences, sort of like the way Damon reacts to being told about the rape and his storyline versus Comer's. Or the actual rape scene is very different in the two things, but like I think there's some stuff that's going to be really really small and just kind of going to be impressive to watch.
I'm interested in like the logistical way they shot it. I assume because logistically the easiest way to do it is do the same scene 3 times in a row, so you don't have to keep like re-saying the same stuff and do it from all 3 perspectives or 2 perspectives based on how many ones that's in. But like performance-wise, could also make sense that they just had 1 perspective at a time, so they can be in that like zone of the performance and then correct themselves for the other ones.
I feel like it'd be really hard if you were asked to do 3 versions of the same scene in a row as an actor. It just feels like a really tough one to accomplish.
And be consistent with how you do those same 3 different plays with the next scene you do. That you have the same consistent in your characterizations.
Can you imagine how the script supervisor in this film had to do? That job had to be so freaking hard.
So you brought up the rape 10 seconds ago. I do want to talk that there's like a good amount of detractors. I've read a couple pretty like really good reviews.
Yeah, go ahead.
About negative reviews, kind of about the rape being a little too much in it, and kind of the idea that I think is a valid idea to have, not necessarily when I share, but a valid idea that a movie can't be entertaining and contain a rape scene. My pushback about this I guess this movie's as entertaining, but it's not as funny as some of these detractors are putting off. Like just because they're like, is a joke. Like Ben Affleck says, "Take off your fucking pants." It's funny.
But there are moments of humor.
So fucking brutal throughout. So it's not taking this lightly at all. It's dealt with very deeply. But even the violence is not, fun the way they're shown. Everything is brutal. You also see Adam Driver's like naked corpse hung from the straps at the end. Everything is very intense and dealt with seriously in a way that I don't think is discounting the seriousness of the rape or exploiting it. I think it is dealt with in a very serious manner. I don't have a better term than that. So I like understand the perspectives against that, and I said it's a very valid argument, but I don't know if you are discounting how serious that the movie I think is doing with it. And they're like seeing one action scene and taking it as it's an action movie using the rape as a crux. I think it's like the story. It's maybe horrible to say it's like about the rape. It's not using it as a plot device, but it's about like it's the discourse around that. That is the thematic, like really purpose of this movie. It's not about the duel.
Well, I mean, I think that I think it is
about rape culture.
It is a lot about that. I think. I mean, I would also disagree that this movie is trying to be. I think it's fun in moments, but I don't think necessarily the movie's overall goal is to be that fun. I also think the way that they
that does not mean we're just kind of this movie and saying this movie's
No, I think even the way they shot the scene, I thought was like they did
intense, like it should be. You're not supposed to.
It's intense, but they didn't feel exploited. It didn't feel like they played it up. We didn't. We sort of saw like I think it was really effective, in the sort of like the progress that happens when somebody is violated, from fighting back to realizing that they can't escape to kind of like shutting down and like kind of letting it happen because they know that there's no other option. I think that it let Comer play all versions of that. I think it did a good job being like sufficiently traumatizing to you as an audience member so you can understand what she went through in that moment without ever feeling like they're exploiting her. I think they did a couple really good things, which is one, you did a rape scene where you see basically no nudity. I think that they were like very intentionally
being like little nudity throughout the movie. There's one scene of the orgies, but for a lot of medieval sex, there's little nudity.
Yeah, I mean, even the orgies are like the shots of the background. You're not seeing anything. Yeah. I think that they knew
exploitative. Yeah,
they knew tonally what they were trying to do. They're like, look,
they're trying to glorify.
They were like, there are people who are naked in the scene, but there was never like, let's do a close up on like somebody's genitalia.
Then it becomes exploitative. Yeah.
Right. I think also even just like, I think focusing on Comer's face during the rape was, I think, more effective than it would have been to see the actual effects on her. I think and then even just like the weirdness after the fact, I think they played that well. Just like even Driver, a man who is very arrogant and thinks himself very witty, doesn't really have a response, and like how creepy his response is, but also how like just a slight difference tonally makes it so much creepier when it's in her storyline versus his. Yeah. I saw criticism of this film. I don't necessarily agree with most of them.
I think there's level of people I respect and think is extremely valid, and I'm fine with this spin that maybe rape just doesn't need to be shown in movies. Like too uncomfortable. If you're like rape should never be in there, therefore I don't really like have interest in this movie, fine. That I understand that's valid. But for people who've like maybe that can be there but it needs to be dealt with like, seriously, but then think this movie didn't deal with it seriously enough is where I have a little bit of pushback. Because I do think that it handles it with grace isn't the right word, but with nuance and a level of importance. They're showing.
I would agree. I would say that like if you were somebody who's just like, yep, sexual assault stuff, I'm just never going to watch that. That's fine. I'm a little bit more confused if you're a critic and you watch this movie and you go, that scene is the tiebreaker for me, because I feel like don't get me wrong, there are a lot of movies that use rape as a plot convenience and have, gory sort of suggestive sequences where it happens and like really try to play it up in a way that kind of kills the rest of the movie. I think this movie does a really good job making it clear how devastating and life-changing that event is without also making it so in your face is not the right term, but like we don't see enough of it to ruin the rest of the film and make it impossible for us to ever like enjoy another sequence in the film. I think also I think so much of this movie is about the response to the rape more than it is to the specific rape. And I think even she has her friends turn against her because that is one of the most like classical rape culture sequences I've ever seen. Her friends turn against her because offhandedly one time she mentioned Degrees was handsome. Something as simple as saying Degrees was handsome means that now that even her closest friends wouldn't believe her. And then the crazy questioning and like even just like the weird tribunal stuff where she's being asked about like, does she like having sex with her husband? Does it feel good? Does she get pleasure from all these just weirdness, like this weird, creepy, like invasive vibes when she's just trying to speak up. And then her like resoluteness and, toughness in in all these moments where she continues to, speak her truth. I think it's actually really impressive for the way it addresses modern, discussion around rape back in, 1370 or whatever it was.
Sure. That's the exact year. I would be very impressed if you're correct.
We'll look this up now. We'll see. Let's see if I'm actually correct.
I'm going to go with 1368.
1368? It's 1386. So I'm actually not
I just had to reverse. Damn it.
So it's 1369 is the Caroline War. So you fight in the war. That's interesting.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's the war between France and England. Interesting. All right. we've talked about, I feel like, almost everything, right? Great movie.
I feel good.
Really good
Everyone
performances.
looks like goats. That's the last thing I say. They all look like goats.
It takes you a second to get used to it, especially with somebody like Damon, because you're so not used to the look. But actually, I think they're really effective.
For him, it's not the feature as much as the scars. The scars is what really does him in.
It is really interesting to watch Matt Damon play ugly, uncharming, kind of brutish. It's very much not. I think he's really. I think you're right. This is one of these roles that I don't know if he's been given the credit he deserves in like how hard this is for him, because especially considering this is
character.
Well, if you look at the other roles, right, that's very much an Adam Driver role. That's very much a Ben Affleck role. But that's very much not a Matt Damon role of the three male actors. Like, he's the one who's playing by far the farthest away from his usual type.
Yeah. I think it's
really
good.
I hope more people see it, and I hope gets some Oscars at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Shout out to Harry Gregson Williams. Really good score, I think.
I can't honestly remember it that much.
I mean, I liked it in the moment. And then Darius Wolski is the cinematographer. I think a very well shot film. The Last Duel.
Still kind of look like Robin Hood to me, but I'll let it go.
It's all right. That's all right. That Robin Hood is very weird. Ridley Scott's Robin Hood. Weird movie. All right, we're not going to talk about Ridley Scott's Robin Hood. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our lovely discussion of The Last Duel. Coming this Saturday is our discussion on Rounders, the fourth movie in the Matt Damon month, with Cody Newbury.
Yep.
We'll see
the
you
sequel to Squares. It's my best joke I've ever said.
It's the greatest joke ever. And with that being said, good night, folks. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good luck. Good run.